This is the final video of the SaaS game. I will answer both key questions of this course in this video. Why is Buffer an incredibly weird company? And why is Front more secretive now when it's larger, but was more open when it was smaller? I asked these questions in previous videos when I analyzed Buffer's seed pitch deck and Front's series A to D pitch decks. If you haven't seen those videos, you should see them first. Tap on the banner at the top right corner. Let's begin with the first key question. Why is Buffer an incredibly weird company? You have seen Buffer's business model slide before. When we discussed this slide earlier, I also told you that Buffer has a 6% sign-up rate on its website for free users. So, if 100 visitors visit Buffer's website, 6 sign up to become free users. This is how their conversion funnel looks like. Now, can you look at this slide closely and figure out what is Buffer's marketing strategy? How is Buffer planning to acquire new users? Not just this slide, I want you to look at their entire pitch deck again and then answer this question. How does Buffer plan to acquire new users? Pause the video if you need to. If you need to see the pitch deck again, there is a link to it in the description. So, did you figure out Buffer's marketing strategy? How are they planning to let their potential users know about their product? Buffer hasn't mentioned anything about their user acquisition plans in their deck. It's not explained anywhere in the deck how Buffer plans to acquire new users. So, based on this data and their deck, what do you think should be Buffer's marketing strategy? How should Buffer acquire new users? Let's start with the simplest of marketing strategies, running Google or Facebook ads. Buffer can run such ads, right? Now, all that a Google or Facebook ad can do is to get a user to Buffer's website. For Buffer to get paid though, the user must first sign up to become a free user, which 6% of all visitors do, and then the free user must become a paid user after they outgrow Buffer's free plan, which 2% of all the free users do. Earlier, we had calculated the break-even cost of a free user for Buffer as $4.8. Revising the logic for that, out of 100 free users, 2 become paid users and pay an LTV of $240 each. So, the break-even cost of one free user is $480 divided by 100, which is $4.8. Can you extend this logic and calculate the break-even cost of a website visitor? We know the break-even cost for a free user at the middle of this funnel. But what is the break-even cost for a website visitor at the top of this funnel? Well, out of 100 website visitors, 6 sign up to become free users. So the break-even cost of one website visitor is $4.8 multiplied by 6 and divided by 100, which is 29 cents. But notice that if Buffer spends all 29 cents as CAC, customer acquisition cost, to pay for a website visit, then it will have spent its entire LTV on customer acquisition alone. If Buffer had to maintain an LTV by CAC ratio of 3, which is the minimum that a healthy business should have, then the maximum CAC it can have for a website visit is 29 divided by 3, which is 9.6 cents. Now, if you have spent any time running ads on Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, or any other digital medium, you would instinctively know that 9.6 cents per click is disastrously low. Most ads would cost Buffer an average of $1 to $4 per click. Even the best digital marketer will find it hard to run ads that cost less than 50 cents per click. So, Buffer makes very little money from its customers to be able to use digital ads for marketing. Even if Buffer increases its price by 10 times, that will still leave just 96 cents to acquire a new user, which may still be too low to run digital ads. On the other hand, if Buffer did increase its price 10 times from $15 per month to $150 per month, its power users may find that to be too expensive and leave. So, what can Buffer do then? Can it improve its sign-up rate and conversion rates enough to make a 10x difference? That's unlikely. Can it try ads on offline channels like TV ads, radio ads, and print ads? No, these ads are usually many times more expensive than digital ads, unless you have such massive scale that you can make these channels work. So, what can Buffer do? Can they set up an outbound telemarketing system to acquire new users like Front at Series D? No, that would be much more expensive than digital ads. How about selling to users in trade shows and conferences like Viva? That would be extremely expensive and pointless. So what can Buffer do? How can Buffer tell its potential users that it exists? The only possible answer is free marketing or virality. Buffer must figure out a way to go viral. If Buffer cannot get free marketing to work, users will never discover Buffer. And how do you do free marketing? There is no real playbook for it, apart from doing things that are unexpected and new and weird. This is the reason that Buffer is a weird company. People know about Buffer because of its radical transparency. Buffer would not exist if it did not adopt radical transparency, which inspired thousands of people to write about them. It would not exist without figuring out virality. Buffer would not exist if it were not a weird company. But there's an important nuance. Buffer's founders most probably did not make a conscious decision to adopt radical transparency in an attempt to go viral. They did not decide to become weird so they could get free marketing. No, this is the anthropic principle at play. Because the founders had uncommon and weird beliefs, they did something that got them virality and they ended up with a company which made $20 million in ARR. They probably did not become weird to chase success, but success came to them because they were already weird. Had they not been weird, they wouldn't have succeeded, and we wouldn't have heard of them. The anthropic principle is an analogy from astronomy. When astronomers measure the properties of the universe, they find several fundamental constants like the Planck constant and the gravitational constant. If any of these fundamental constants were to be different from what they are, life would not have been possible in the universe. But nobody knows why these constants have the values that they have. It's a mystery. The anthropic principle is an answer to this mystery. Had the fundamental constants been different, life would not have been possible, and there would not have been anyone to ask why the fundamental constants have the value that they have. Coming back to Buffer. When Buffer pitched for its seed round, what was Buffer's biggest weakness? I left this question unanswered in the earlier video on Buffer's seed deck. So, what was the weakest point of Buffer's pitch? It was not churn or defensibility or incumbent response. It was go-to-market or their marketing strategy. Buffer did not have any way of telling the world that it existed. Moving on to the second key question. Why is Front more secretive now when it's larger, but was more open when it was smaller? To answer this question, I will need to compare what we learned from the pitch decks of Buffer, Front, and Viva and summarize those learnings in a framework. So, let's compare Buffer, Front, and Viva. All three are SaaS companies, but they are all incredibly different from each other in so many ways. Let's start with product and support. Buffer's product was self-serve. Its support was also self-serve. At Series A, Front's product was also self-serve, and their support was self-serve as well. They did not have any support agents. Look at this slide though. This is Front's pricing page in October 2022, after its Series D. Notice the rightmost plan called Scale that is tagged Most Popular. The text in italics says includes onboarding assistance, expert solution design, and ongoing consulting. This implies that Front's product has evolved to become much more configurable and much more complex. So the most popular plan includes human support for onboarding new customers. If you look at the fine print on their pricing page, This is how Front describes onboarding and change management that are both included in its scale plan. Notice that both features mention a dedicated account manager to help new customers. Finally, if you delve even deeper into the fine print, the pricing page mentions the nature of dedicated support in the three plans. They are offering chat support in their most popular plan. So Front is no longer self-serve and now employs support agents who help customers through chat. Moving on. This was Viva's articulation of its product. They mentioned 26 different products on this slide, and these are definitely not self-serve. Viva charges $1.2 million per year on average to each of its customers for a highly complex product suite. Viva's support is equally complex. They have a complete managed services offering that can manage entire system administration for the customer, which will probably include a dedicated team that may even operate out of the customer's office. Next, let's move on to the buyer. Buffer's buyers were individuals who were power users of social media. At Series A, Front's buyer was a team lead buying the product for their team. But by Series C, Front's buyer had changed. Now it was a department head buying the product for their entire department. And Viva's buyers are CXOs and board committees, because you need committees to make such complex decisions that involve buying products worth millions of dollars. Next, let's move on to sales and marketing. Buffer did not have a sales team at all and did not even present a marketing strategy in its deck. At Series A, Front had two AEs to sell only to inbound leads, and 70% of all leads came from their blog, which they were calling their organic or content marketing strategy. But this had started to change by Series B as paid marketing had begun to grow rapidly. And by Series C, outbound sales had also started to grow rapidly. Finally, sales and marketing at Viva is incredibly sophisticated. A salesperson at Viva may nurture a relationship with a client for years and years before making a single dollar in sales. There's a great article on how this kind of high-value selling works by Amy Volas, who has closed more than $100 million of revenue in her software sales career of 20 years. I have put a link to the article in the description in case you want to learn more about how million-dollar sales work. But the crux of the article is right here. Consult, don't sell. Let's put all 6 elements together on this slide: product, buyer, marketing, sales, selling process, and support. Notice that as we go across the columns from Buffer on the left to Front at Series A to Front at Series C or D, and finally to Viva, the complexity of the product keeps increasing. The product becomes more and more complex as we move from left to right. Similarly, as we move right from Buffer to Viva, the buyer changes from an individual to a team lead to a department head and finally to entire committees. And as a consequence, the buying process also changes from a simple process to an extremely complex process. Marketing moves from cheap methods like content marketing to much more expensive methods as we move from left to right. Coming to sales and the selling process. As we move from left to right, we encounter Buffer, which had no salespeople, then Front at Series A, which had 2 salespeople doing only inbound sales, then Front at Series C, with 46 salespeople who were also doing outbound sales, and finally Viva, which had a sophisticated sales process involving strategies like reference selling, where you train your existing customers to become your evangelists. This is also a move from cheap to expensive as we move from left to right. And finally, support also goes from self-serve for Buffer to managed services for Viva, which is again a move from cheap to expensive. So, even though all 4 columns are companies selling SaaS products, their business organizations are entirely different across each of these 6 elements. Each company is an entirely different beast. You should also have noticed that another key metric goes from low to high as we move from left to right. It is ARPU, average revenue per user. Buffer had an ARPU of $180 a year. Front at Series A had an ARPU of $1,440 a year. Front at Series C had an ARPU of $6,400 a year, and Viva had an ARPU of $1.2 million a year. And it is ARPU that is driving these companies to be such different beasts. This insight that ARPU drives companies to be entirely different beasts was popularized by Christoph Jans, the founder of Point 9 Capital. Jans wrote an article in 2014 about 6 ways in which you can build a $100 million annual revenue business. You can sell to flies that pay you about $10 every year, and you will need 10 million such flies. Or you can sell to mice that have an ARPU of $100 every year, and you will need 1 million mice. Or rabbits that have an ARPU of $1,000 every year, and you need 100,000 rabbits. Deer pay you $10,000 a year, so you need 10,000 deer. Elephants pay you $100,000 a year, so you just need 1,000 elephants to get to 100 million in revenue. And finally, whales pay you $1 million a year, so you need just 100 whales. There's a link to the article in the description. The key insight in the article is that each beast needs a different hunter. Each beast needs an entirely different kind of a business organization to hunt it. For example, if you are a mice hunter, like Buffer, your ARPU is so low that your product has to be self-serve. You cannot afford onboarding teams for customers. At $100 per year, your buyer is likely to be an individual, and you will not have any marketing channel available unless you figure out free marketing and virality. You obviously will not be able to afford any sales team at this ARPU level, and the selling process is likely to be just a website that induces free trials. Finally, the ARPU is also too low to offer human support, so the product will also need to enable self-serve support. Buffer is a mice hunter. Dropbox is another mice hunter. When we analyzed Dropbox YC application in the second course of the specialization, I mentioned that the GTM strategy was missing. This was a huge problem for Dropbox, and the key breakthrough they made was to figure out that virality was possible in the space by giving out free storage to users for referring other users. This made Dropbox go viral. Had Dropbox not figured out virality, it would not have existed. The same product, the same great tech, the same great founder, but the ARPU was too low for any marketing strategy to work unless they could figure out free marketing. Next, if you are hunting rabbits, your ARPU is still too low to offer onboarding support, so your product still has to be self-serve. At $1,000 a year, you will probably be selling to team leads like Front was at Series A. The ARPU is just about enough to experiment with digital ads, but most probably you will be relying on content marketing, not on paid marketing. At this stage, you will be able to afford a telesales team that calls up inbound leads, but you will probably not be able to afford on-call support for your customers. Front at Series A was a rabbit hunter. Zoho is an example of a rabbit hunter from India. Next, if you are hunting deer, at an ARPU of $10,000 per year, your product is likely to need a lot of configurations and complexity to deliver enough value to justify its cost. But the ARPU is high enough for you to have an onboarding team handhold customers and configure the product for them. Your buyer is likely to be higher up the corporate ladder, probably a department head, as the case was with Front at Series C. You can now afford a telesales team that will also be able to do lead generation through outbound initiatives. Finally, the ARPU is large enough to offer human support through call or chat. Front at Series C had become a deer hunter. Freshworks is an example of a deer hunter from India. Next, if you are hunting elephants, your ARPU will be about $100,000 a year, and you will be able to sell at that ARPU level only if you are helping a large organization solve complex problems, which will mean that your product will have a large scope and will be heavily configurable. It will not be something that the customer will ever be able to configure themselves. They will need account managers to configure the system for them. At this ARPU level, your buyers will be CXOs buying for their entire organization. How about marketing strategy at this level? Which marketing strategies do you think will work? TV ads? Broadcast the message to an entire country? No. Ads will be useless to acquire customers at this level because your audience now will be very limited. In a mid-sized country, there may be just 500 CXOs who could be your potential buyers. And your field sales team will probably have the emails and phone numbers of all those 500 CXOs. So they will keep meeting those CXOs again and again until the product sells. You will participate in trade shows and conferences to enable your sales team to meet your target CXOs. But an elephant hunter may not need to take out any large-scale ads ever. It may not even put out a blog. Its website may also be non-existent. It's hunting a different beast. The sales process will also be much more complex. It may involve multiple pilots with a potential customer before any deal is done. And support will require dedicated account managers. Capillary is an example of an elephant hunter from India. Next, if you are hunting whales, your product must solve mission-critical problems for very large organizations to justify an ARPU of $1 million every year. Your product will also need to be heavily customizable because each customer will need customization for their own specific business processes. The buyers will be entire committees that will need tenders and RFPs for everything. You should expect full-featured multi-year pilots of your product before the organization decides to buy. Your salespeople must become trusted advisors of the committee members, sometimes nurturing a relationship for years before any sale is made. Your marketing strategy will have to be multi-touch. You will need to engage the CEO of the buyer, the COO, CIO, multiple vice presidents, board members, and consultants who can influence how committee members think. And you will need to offer managed services and on-site support to your customers. We have seen that Viva is a whale hunter. Vimo is a whale hunter from India. This framework should help you think about how to design your SaaS business organization and how ARPU plays a critical role in organization design. I call it the animal hunting framework of SaaS organization design. Note that I have left out flies from this framework because $10 a year is not the territory of SaaS. Social media companies that monetize through ads operate in this territory and they are entirely different beasts. Coming back to the second key question in this course, why is front more secretive now when it's larger, but was more open when it was smaller? Have you figured out the answer now? It's the same reason why Buffer is a weird company. If you haven't figured it out yet, think about what has changed at front between Series A and Series C. What's different? If you answered ARPU, you are correct. ARPU has changed dramatically from $1,400 to $6,400. At Series A, front was hunting rabbits. At Series C, front was hunting deer. At Series A, front's ARPU was not enough to support outbound sales teams. It needed attention to generate leads that its inbound sales teams could sell to. Releasing the pitch deck was one of the ways in which front garnered attention then. But by Series C, attention was much less important for front. So it reverted to the default rational behavior of revealing little until it nears an IPO, when it will again have to reveal everything due to public listing rules. One more thing, this transformation that front went through between Series A and Series C was not ordinary. It was not easy or obvious. It was a DNA level transformation that the company went through, and kudos to them for executing it successfully. All the departments and capabilities that front had as a rabbit hunter had to completely transform for it to become a deer hunter. Many SaaS founders pitch that they will move upmarket and increase their ARPU once their product matures. But it is incredibly difficult to actually do so because all aspects of your company have to be completely transformed to actually make this change. Another mistake many SaaS founders make is to try and hunt two different kinds of animals at the same time. This again doesn't work because an organization that hunts deer, for example, is entirely different from one that hunts elephants. It is much better to focus on hunting just one kind of animal till you dominate your market. And then think about how you will set up an almost parallel organization to go hunt another animal. Finally, for an early stage startup to get off the ground, the founding team must have the DNA to hunt the animal they are going after. For example, if you are hunting mice, you must have the DNA to attract attention by doing unconventional things that get you free marketing, PR, and virality. And if you are hunting whales, you must be comfortable navigating buyer committees, making multi-year pilots successful, and dealing with RFPs and tenders. So choose the animal you want to hunt wisely. This is the end of the SaaS game, which was the third course in the venture capital and entrepreneurship specialization. I hope some of the ideas I presented made you think and perhaps have a discussion with your friends. Next, let's meet again in the final course of this specialization, the Internet Aggregation game. Hey there, I'm KJ Saxena, founder of Relentless VC. The video you just watched is part of the venture capital and entrepreneurship specialization, which is available absolutely for free on relentless.ventures. Go check it out. If you're a tech startup founder and want to raise money from us, you should apply on our website. Lastly, if you like this video, do subscribe and share it with your friends.